this meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. This meeting is being recorded by the Charter Review Committee. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify me, the chairperson, at this time. Is anyone else recording the meeting? Thank you. All right, let's do a roll call. Please acknowledge your presence by saying aye or yes. Councilor Gilmore.
Yes.
Councilor Gilmore, you here? Doing roll call.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilor
Can you
Forgy?
hear me?
I can,
Yeah.
Sheila, thank you.
Here.
Councilor Wheeler?
Aye.
Aaron?
Yes.
Lunt?
Aye.
Alan Woods?
Yes.
You've made it. And David Singer here. Good, we have everybody here. It says that we don't have minutes to accept, but there are minutes out there. Have people seen the minutes from the last meeting? If you haven't seen the minutes from the last meeting, please say that you haven't. They weren't sent.
I haven't.
Everybody else?
I have suggested charter changes. I don't have minutes. Unless I'm looking in the wrong spot.
Well, there are minutes posted, but
it
they're
could be me, but I don't have them either. Sorry to interrupt.
all right. That's fine. Just to let the public know and everyone know, there are minutes online for the meeting of the 14th. They just haven't been approved. So I'll approve them at the next meeting because I'm not going to have you vote on something that you don't have in front of you. Okay, there are no public hearings. Those who are visiting us online, this is not a public hearing, so I'm not going to invite you to speak, but I'm happy that you're here listening, so I appreciate that. There are no motions before us, so let's get into it. I would say let's try to meet till maybe 7 o'clock, but if we need to go over because we're doing a good job, that's fine, but at least meet for an hour and a half. All right, so we have a lot of information that we've gotten even since the 14th, the last time we met. We did have a public hearing, which we all attended. And I wanted to make sure, because I had sent you all a packet of the charter with a lot of the suggested changes in it sometime back in September. So I asked Tammy to put together what she believed were the things that we had received since September 14th. Has everyone on the committee received that packet of materials? If you haven't, let me know.
That was in the email where we got the agenda, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Now, I also sent you, I had received a letter from a James Fotopoulos, and I asked that letter be forwarded. I don't know if that got forwarded. The substance of that letter was to increase the school committee to 9 members. What else? Today, Erin sent us some good work that she and John have been doing on drafting the Article 6. Did you all get that?
Mm-hmm.
So when I ask if you all got it, if you didn't get it, you got it. And if you didn't get it, just let me know. And then I don't think you got this, but I happened to be talking to Butch Hawkins about the fire department, and there were also some questions that had come in about the Public Safety Commission. So he did send an email, and I asked Tammy to forward it to you. They want to add EMS to their provision, and there was a question about a provision in the Public Safety Commission portion of the charter that spoke about commission members shall be special municipal employees. And I asked him if he would please help answer the question that was raised. And he did send an attachment, which I could not open, but maybe the rest of you can. But so adding those two things in, let's see if we have everything. Let's see. Susan Wergoftik sent a follow-up that about, because she had spoken at the charter at the public hearing, and she made some more suggestions. Susan Hollins sent her suggested changes. I don't know if John and Aaron had seen those when they did their drafting. Had you seen those when you did? John had not. Aaron, had you seen it?
No, I hadn't seen it.
Yes, I saw them, some of which relate to the school committee section, but some relate to other sections.
Okay. Karen Larrabee sent an email pertaining to the amount of percentage of people needed to do a referendum petition. Susan and her group sent us something before the public hearing that's rather lengthy. Joseph Sabella sent an email about, he sent an email on October 7th. Judy Fusoni sent an email on October 8th. Isaac Moss sent an email on October 10th. Now, Al Wood sent me an email, which I have not forwarded to you, but I will do tomorrow. He and I were working on section 7, and I had not had a chance to get back to him, so I didn't send it out, but I will. And then Sheila sent something to me yesterday about the ranked choice voting. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Alan. And I don't know if people saw this during the month. Marcia Stone sent something about changing the number of members on the Council of Aging. And Councilor Wheeler on September 14th sent something about the legislative branch changes, which I printed this morning, this afternoon. I don't know if you have. So it's been really interesting to keep up with all the correspondence. I feel like I'm at 90%. The reason I say this is in case people have gotten things that they haven't heard me speak about. Don't be afraid to send them out and say, how about this, how about this, how about this? For those listening from the public, we've already had our public hearing. I'm always available to hear people's comments, but we're really down to the point where we're going to start to talk about the different sections. So if somebody really has something who's listening that they want us to be interested in listening to or listening about from you, send it into the clerk's office ASAP, please, especially by the end of the month. Okay. So having gone through that, does anybody disagree with my rendition of those things, going through the things that Tammy sent you today? Is there anything I need to hear from you about that? Okay. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and I'm trying to think. By the way, I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. The last several weeks I've been working with the fire department building project, so I apologize. I did spend the weekend and today working on this, so I feel like I'm up to speed, but I didn't get a chance to share that with everybody. So my idea of what to do is maybe to start jumping in to some of the sections that are relatively straightforward to talk about and see if we can start coming to some agreement about how we want to present those changes to the council and, start getting some work done. If anybody, does that work for everybody? If you don't agree with me, just say something. If your silence means that you agree. Okay. So I've done, and I would suggest that you all do as well, or maybe give me a better suggestion. So Tammy sent out a charter early on, and I printed the whole thing. It's let me see, I don't know, almost 40 pages. And then I took the beginning suggestions and I edited this not by Word but by my hand, and then I attached exhibits, and I sent all of that to you sometime at the beginning of September. So that's what I'm working off of. And then as I get new things, I kind of add to it. I have not given you my updated version of that, but I figure you all can see the method that I'm using, and I hope that's for you. So, for example, if we start by just going to Article 1, are there any things in Article 1 that might have suggested changes? The first thing that comes to mind is under Section 1-7, the definition, subsection letter O. on voters. When we first started talking, the mayor wanted to clarify that it's who reside in the town of Greenfield, or it could be the city of Greenfield. And so she sent that as part of her memo. But I got a second memo that I thought, I don't know if you all got it. That's why I wanted to go through everything. It was a memo about whether resident aliens should be included in that group. Should be included in the definition. Have people been aware that somebody made that suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And this
Thought
is the
maybe we could
definition
just-
for voters?
Voters?
Is this the definition for, what definition are we talking about?
Voters. So it's
they're legally
letters.
allowed to-
I'm sorry.
So if they're legally allowed to vote, why would we not include anyone? Or vice
Okay,
versa?
that was the reason that was stated by the person who suggested it. Anybody else have any? It's a suggestion, so yes, Chris.
The definition of a resident alien would be really good for all of us to hear.
All right. Guess I could look it up on my phone. I looked it up when I got it. I also looked at, there are, it's not unusual to have resident aliens vote, but it definitely is, it goes community by community or state by state.
So I would like to know if there are any differences between a legal permanent resident and a resident alien. I'm for it in concept. I'm not sure I understand the definition well enough. And I'd like to do that before.
Okay, so, okay, that's fair. Well, Sheila, you're in charge of those sections. So would you be
Yeah, and I
okay
didn't do anything with this. In fact, I'm just looking at my notes and it didn't make it into my notes either. But I just
All right, you want
Googled
me
it
to
real quick. It looks like it's optional based on the town. So it's something that we should probably, start considering and see if that's something that people in Greenfield are interested in having. I was looking under.
But I guess when I assigned everybody certain, your assignment was to be in charge of Article 1. So is that something that you could find out for us and send us?
Oh no, I can definitely do it. I just didn't have it in my notes under Article 1.
That's fine. That's why I brought it up tonight, just to see what people had it. But so that would be added to voters, but it would also need a definition for resident alien.
Right.
Okay.
So is that the nomenclature that people are using nowadays? Because I think usually they shy away from the word alien.
Well, I don't know. I'm on the wrong side.
I'll look into it.
I think the other term would be non-citizen resident. That's just my guess.
Well, that would be.
Yeah, I'll look into it.
But if I may.
It refers back to a specific law.
Yeah, it actually really matters. Legal residency versus non-citizen. I don't actually know what specifically the differences are. But there are examples where legal residents who are not naturalized citizens can vote in certain local elections. But I don't think, Sheila, you're going to find a sort of a sweeping one thing covers all. And I think the specific definition really matters in terms of what the applicable law is.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got a
I think you're right, John, that there's a difference between voting in local or national elections. So, but anyway, I'm glad that it seems like is it fair to say that people are interested in hearing what Sheila would come up with and having another discussion about whether that could be added to the definition? Yes.
Sure.
All right, great. Okay. Thank you, Sheila. Okay, moving on to section 2. Composition of the council. There have been several different suggestions for how the council could be comprised. Boss came up with an interesting suggestion. Councilor DeSorger, I think, suggested maybe that we shrink a couple of members. Other people have come out clearly that they don't want that. Somebody actually said expand it to more members. Is there a general feeling from folks about that? I can't see everybody's face, so I don't know if people are. So if you want to speak, why don't you go in the chat room and say, I'd love to say something about that, and then I'll recognize you. Yes, Chris.
Well, I certainly don't think we should expand the number. We've been there and done that before with a 27-member town council. And I think you spend all your time on procedure and not so much on the process. So I would not be in favor of expanding it more than 13. The membership of committees seems to be a theme that's running throughout a number of our sections, where people are saying add 2, add 3, take away 1, that kind of stuff. So I think that there is a role for fine tuning. I was in favor of 9. Okay, so that we had not 9. I'm sorry, 11. So that we had 2 down, and so we reduced the number of at-large counselors. But I wondered, now, David, this is going to go back to you because you were on the original charter commission,
Yes.
committee,
Yes.
committee. And I was going to ask for the recommendation or the rationale behind why it was decided that 4 at-large counselors would be better than 2 at-large counselors.
That's a good question. I actually have my notes from the Charter Commission somewhere in my life, but it was the commission too. It was not a committee. It was actually a commission. So we were given more.
Thank you.
The only thing I can talk about is my memory, which is that there was a fear of going down too much because 27 was what people were used to.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt comfortable to stay at 13. I don't think there was any other reason than that.
Okay.
The at-large clearly had a reason because we wanted to have people run citywide versus run precinct-wide. So the number, so again, it could have been 2, it could have been 3, it could have been 4. I don't think 3 would have been no, we had to have odds. So it's either going to be 11 or 13.
Right.
I don't think there's any reason other than the fact that we knew that the charter was going to be a hard sell and charter change was going to be a hard sell. So we wanted to keep things in a place where most people felt comfortable. That's my memory. I will look it up, but I think I can tell you the distinction for at large, but I can't tell you the other, because there was no at large counselors in the other charter. It was all precinct, as I understood it. It was 27, 9 times 3 counselors in every district. So is that helpful?
Can I do a follow-up, please?
You can, and then I'm going to let Sheila ask her question and make her comment.
Okay. I also wanted to put out there that there has been a suggestion as well that we go to the whole idea behind the charter change was to move from one form of government to another, to streamline and make it more professional. So there are people out there that are suggesting that we have, for instance, 9 at-large candidates or 7 at-large candidates with everybody being at large and nobody being in a particular precinct. I'm just throwing that out there for discussion. And I feel that, everybody who's made a recommendation on all of this should have their thoughts thrown out there for us to discuss what the best way forward is. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll respond. I want to remind me, Chris, to respond to the last piece
Okay.
about making sure everybody is noted in the
Okay.
report. Go ahead, Sheila.
No, if you want to respond to her before we go off topic, go ahead and do that because I can make my case in a moment.
Okay, so this is again, I'm very egalitarian about this, but my image of the report would be, for example, so there've been a lot of different suggestions about changing the number of counselors. Chris, what you talked about, I think, is similar to what Isaac Moss had made in his suggestion. I thought that let's say if we all took a vote or a straw vote or something, and or at least there was a sense that we all thought the council should stay the same, okay? So by some measure, which you can help me make that measurement, but by some measure, that's more than half of us think that. I planned on putting into an appendix every suggestion related to that provision, so that if the council heard that, I mean, the committee is made up of people who are trying to think about what's best going forward. And if this committee thinks that 13 is okay, we can make that recommendation. But that doesn't mean that Ginny DeSorger's suggestion or Isaac Moss's suggestion or anybody else's suggestion shouldn't be in the in an appendix and noted somewhere that there are other suggestions that you might want to see. But that the committee itself made, which is, I think, the reason for our being here, is because we represent sort of some measure of the population, would make a recommendation. But that's all. So does that work for you, Chris, in terms of how to make the presentation?
That's brilliant. I like it.
Okay. D-Lock.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question or see if I have some clarity on the issue. My understanding is that reducing the number of city council seats is an effort to streamline the process, to make it work more functionally. And the idea of increasing it is a movement to increase representation, increase voices from across the city. Those the two sides of what's going on here?
Pretty much.
And
Yes.
so to me, I don't know how much the current counselors and former counselors feel that the process is unwieldy or broken in some way or too hard to manage, which would be an important consideration if we were to think about reducing it. And I guess Isaac Mass's email seemed to think that it was very broken, that there was too much time on procedure and process and all the rest and too little business done. But I'm not sure I've heard that from other people. So, in my mind, unless I truly hear the people who are trying to make the government work saying it doesn't work, I would stay with it the way it is, I guess.
Thank you, Alan. I had Sheila and John and Otis before. Sheila, you still want to talk, or are you deferring?
No, I wanted to give you a chance to respond to Chris so that you didn't lose your train of thought.
Thanks.
The point that I wanted to make is, it seems like we did have a few people talking to us about reducing the number of counselors, but I think the majority of people who contacted us talked about keeping it the same or increasing. I don't see a dire need to either reduce or increase, but I know logistically that would be difficult. So I would say maybe we keep it at status quo. Just because, I personally don't see a big problem with it. And another thing that people had mentioned was having, everybody be at large instead of having separate precincts. And I think that is probably worth talking about because I don't necessarily spend all of my time dealing with precinct 6. I mean, I have people who write to me from all over town, and a lot of people don't know what precinct they live in. You know, they just know they have a pothole, and you know, this person on the city council is a friend of a friend, so they reach out to them. So, for my 2 cents, for what it's worth.
Thank you. Interesting. I would say this, that the precinct councilors are like the House of Representatives and the at-large councilors are like the Senate. So if you want to think about people feeling like their neighbor, at least they can have a neighbor representing, one neighbor representing their interest on the council, and then the others are clearly, you know, the other 8 are not, and then the at-large are everybody. So you can kind of reach out to them if your own counselor doesn't agree with you, or if you want to gain more support where your counselor is the only one that that is expressing, you know, your concerns. So I think that's the reason why there are precinct and at large. That's the reason, for better or for worse. John Lund, did you have something to say? I thought I saw you on there, but otherwise I'm going to go to Otis. And
No,
then,
I did. I guess as we get started, I wanted to just step back for a minute and see if we felt that we should have some sort of stated rationale for change. My concern about jumping in is it can lead to being sort of ad hoc about everything. And that's not necessarily bad, but is there a framework within which we want to make these recommendations? I hear you saying we don't just want to be a vehicle to just pass on what everybody says. So is this a group that's operating with a bias towards a lower bar for increased manageable access and a higher bar for things that might restrict access or reduce access? I just don't have a sense of where the committee is and if there are going to be any governing principles or behind what we're doing, or are we just going to take each case as it is?
well, that's a question that I would ask you to answer.
Okay.
I don't have an answer for it because I'm consumed, I feel, by a lot of different things that are going on. It's hard for me to just clear out of the woods because I feel like I'm directing a lot of different things. And I've brought you all up to speed, I hope. So I'm looking for we were all appointed to represent the whole community in making these decisions. If you feel like we can have a standard by which we can frame the discussion, I'm happy to hear it.
So what I would say then is that I think as a general proposition, if we're talking about reducing representation or restricting the ability, particularly if we're going to write any kind of restriction into the charter, I think we should have a higher bar in our heads about what we think we need to do that. I think, for example, of the mayor should or should not be able to be the chair of the school committee. I served on a bunch of school committees, and there were school committees where it would have been a very good idea to have the mayor be the chair, and school committees where it was a terrible idea to have the mayor be the chair. But if you're going to say the mayor cannot do it, I think that's a pretty big change. And I read with interest the changes to the size of the council. And I guess I would just say there's always a lot of different interesting ideas about things to do, but I think there has to be at least some sort of rationale for change, some sort of demonstration that this kind of a change would increase equity and access in a manageable way. So, because I agree, 27 counselors would kind of be it could be a procedural clown show at times. And I think that on the flip side of that, if we're actually talking about making a recommendation that is restrictive to people's access or restrictive in representation in any way, or people's ability to serve different roles in government, I think there should be a higher bar that says we think it's really important to do this, because when you write it down and you make it a rule, you take the judgment of the people who are serving at the time away. And I think that I'm not saying I think that's necessarily good or bad, but it is a more drastic step. And I think as we consider and go through, because this charter touches on a lot of different things, I would suggest that we should have a lower bar for increased access and representation as long as it's manageable. and a higher bar for things that restrict access, restrict people's abilities within government. I think we'd have to show why we think that's a good idea. That's just what I think. People may not agree with me, and that's fine, but it just helps me to have a framework within which to think about changing what is a really fundamental document for the town. That's all. Thanks.
No, I want to use this moment because this is the first thing we're really talking about, so this is good. So it would seem to me that in general, well, let me understand if you're saying this in general or just because of this particular thing, John. In general, is it our position that the charter is okay unless somebody can give a rationale for change? And that rationale for change has to what? Be something that makes, so you said, but then you went into the idea that if the change lowers the bar, whatever that means, then it would give more access or more something, but that's only in this particular discussion. So I'm wondering if when you say lower bar, higher bar, more access, restricted access, are you just talking about changing the number of counselors? Or are you talking about that as a test for every provision?
I'm talking about it as a test for everything. If we're discussing something that would take away representation, consolidate representation, that would restrict people from fulfilling certain roles, then I think there should be a higher bar. I think there has to be a rationale for changing what is there, because I think it's easy to propose changes, but I think it's our job to make sure that we think it's a change that will produce some good. I personally think doing that within a rationale that says the goal here is to increase representation within the town, to increase flexibility within the town, or not. I just think having an overall goal, which in my mind is increasing the ease of access and representation within the town and allowing for some flexibility, is better than writing hard rules that say you can't. Excuse me, I didn't say that part correctly. It should be a lower bar to increase that access and equity than the bar that you would have to use to say, and the example of why I used was the mayor can't serve on the school committee. When you're excluding people and restricting things, I think there needs to be a higher bar for why there needs to be that kind of a change, and a lower bar for things that would increase access, as long as it's a manageable thing. But again, that's just my opinion.
No, I think, well, I'm gonna assume that what John just said is workable among all of us, that we could incorporate it into what we say if we want to deviate from what the charter says, unless you want to speak out, as we go along and say you'd want to add or subtract from that. But I would feel okay as the chair starting with that, but I don't want to impose it on everyone. But since we're not in a room where I could see everybody nodding or shaking, I'm just going to have to take it one step at a time. So, Erin, you were next. Erin?
I think Otis is next.
Oh, I'm sorry. Otis.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. I thought, yeah, thanks.
That's okay. I'll try to be brief. I agree with John that with something like that, a big decision, and many of the decisions about the charter are big, I would want more justification or support from the community. I think, while selfishly as a counselor, I might prefer a smaller council, an 11-member council, I wouldn't vote for that on this committee because I haven't seen the support or a convincing argument. I will say to what Alan asked, it is or can be extremely unwieldy to make decisions with a 13-member council. But I don't see the support for it, and I don't see even necessarily the reasoning. I think if you have two opposite poles, if you think of democracy as a I don't know, going from autocracy and monarchy on one hand as the most efficient form of government, and the New England town meeting as the most democratic form of government, You have to make a compromise between efficiency and democracy. And we're not at town meeting anymore, but I don't think want to make it, I don't think it has to be as efficient as I would like it to be. That's all I'll say on that.
So as a general proposition, would you be okay with it staying the same?
Yes.
I guess those who know, I have this little chat box at the lower corner that I'd love to have expanded all the way up the side so I could see everything that's going on. How do I do that? Or do I just see I only see like one person at a time.
There's a, you can either close the participants list. If you have that, you could just close that.
Okay. There you go. Thank you. That's why I missed you. Okay, Erin.
When I started out with the school committee section, to speak to John's point a bit, I tried to think of things that were clearly issues with the section. And rather than looking at it as if it was a blank slate, which I think in terms of the whole charter, so for me, thinking about the number of counselors, it is not something that I necessarily heard of from the counselors themselves or heard of as a major problem that we needed to fix, like some of the other things, like the issue of the petition. And so there were things that we knew going in were issues that were brought to us. And then when we read through, we knew there were issues of clarification. I could have gone into the school committee section and changed a bunch of things that made sense to me, or even that came from an individual on the school committee, but I wasn't hearing from a broad spectrum of the school committee or the town for many of those changes. And so to me, I don't think that we should go in and change even things like the number of counselors if we're not hearing about it as a broad issue that has broad support, even from the town council themselves. It is not, I don't feel like we've heard that from the council writ large. And so that would be my approach in how we go about changing some of the things. If they're clarification things, or if they're issues that we knew were things that needed to be changed and clarified, I think we should go with that. But to me, a charter is not something, it should be a bit more foundational, that you don't just clear out because a few people say that they think something should be different. So that's what I would say about that. I think the town council should stay the same unless we hear a more sweeping opinion. And especially I would want to hear from more of the town councilors themselves that they think it's an issue.
We did have one town councilor, Ginny DeSorger, who sent a recommendation that it be less, and she gave a rationale for it. But in using using John's logic, the question would be, if we're going to decrease the amount of access of people to play the role of counselors, so that would be a restriction, I would think. Then besides maybe what Otis said, which is, yeah, having 11 people be easier than having 13 people, but we can live with 13 people because we have 13 people. We have that number. That number's okay. It's not like 11 will make such a dramatic difference. It's not like 15 will make a dramatic difference. So why go there? So, okay. Anybody else on this particular? It seems like unless I know she gave a couple of good ideas, but it seems to me that in general, keeping it at 13 seems to be, is that a general statement that could be made by the committee? Unless somebody tells Otherwise? Again, this is just a recommendation. The counselors and those counselors that are listening, you can take this up yourselves and have a different discussion about it. But we're sort of representing the community. Not sort of. We are representing the community, and that's how the community. And thank you, John, for your standard is looking at it. Okay. Section 2.2-4. Compensation. This is a very interesting section, and it could be that since I didn't tell you exactly what we're going to do today, you might want to think more about it, and we might talk about it again. But there is a notion out there, and I think Sue brought it up about about the pay for counselors, and I've heard from other people about paying all volunteers because it creates a level playing field for people. Not everyone can afford to volunteer, so therefore being compensated is appropriate. But in this case, it would be about raising, I'm trying to find Susan's suggestion. Where's my pile? Here it is. So Susan's suggestion was pretty high. So anyway, go around the group and what do people think about changing the compensation for counselors? Wow.
I'll start. I mean, right now it's just set by ordinance, and I guess I support that. I mean, it makes it very difficult to raise the compensation for counselors, but maybe that's how it should be. Maybe it should be. I think it should be double what it is, but that's just one man's opinion.
Oh, okay, good. Sheila?
So I remember, I think Susan had suggested 10,000 a year, and her rationale is that this would replace a part-time job for someone who maybe, has to work a full-time job and a part-time job to get by. I really am not sure if higher compensation necessarily would bring more people to the table, and I don't want people serving for the wrong reasons. So I hesitate there, but full disclosure, I have not looked into I don't know if there are other towns where they pay that much, and I don't know if they do have better representation and more people of color and more low income people, more single moms, and these sorts of people that you don't see a lot of in local government. I would be hesitant to change something like that right now, just because I'm viewing everything through like the lens of the pandemic, and knowing so many of our neighbors are out of work right now, and they don't know when they're going back. I'm really hesitant to do anything financial just because of that.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
I'm from the old school, so I'm actually going to say the opposite that Otis said. I really come from the background where volunteerism should not be paid. It's a service, it's a civic obligation, it's a gift from your heart. I do understand financial hardship in some of the people that may find that the stipend is most useful. Right now, I'm also coming from the financial background that to raise anything at this point in time within our general operating budget is not a good thing. I am concerned about finances, and I would vote in favor of getting rid of this compensation piece. But that's, as Otis Very nicely put it. That's just one woman's opinion. Thank you.
There is a way to punt on this, which actually I'm going to talk about at times when we're going through this. So the charter just uses the word may, and that's a good word because that's kind of the constitutional piece of our government that says it doesn't say that counselors shall not be paid. So that would be a prohibition.
Right.
And so I think keep it this. I think the suggestion is a suggestion that I would punt to the city council because it would be in the form of an ordinance. And I think it already is in the form of an ordinance to pay, and that you would have to decide at that level that don't put it in on this level. So that's what I call a punt. Just send it to you. You probably, it sounds like, or may not take it up without some pressure from the community, but I don't think it belongs. I think what's in the charter now works, in my opinion. So that's just my. So I would say that's what I say on some of these things. Like, good suggestion, give it to the council, let them, and I think the council after this committee is going to be busy looking at a lot of possible ordinances because of some of the suggestions that may not be charter worthy, but might be ordinance worthy. So, Erin.
I agree with that. I think it should be at the ordinance level. I think you want the flexibility there. The charter is much less flexible. And from what it sounded like, having a number for the mayor maybe has proven not to be as good of an idea in the charter in terms of compensation. So I personally would like to see counselors paid more, and so I would support the council having an ordinance to pay. I think there's a professionalism that comes with paying people, but I don't think that should be at the charter level. I think it should be at the ordinance level, and I think we should just leave it as is.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to? That seem to satisfy everybody? Leaving it at the ordinance level. Okay, great. All right, that's. I don't know if there's anything else in. Oh, okay. Let's see. Yes. So in section 2, under section 2-11. I think Councilor Wheeler brought this up when we were one of our first discussions, and so we're at this point now. So yes, we have a procedure for filling vacancies, and that's been used before, but we have to integrate this with what happens if the mayor can't serve and the president of the city council becomes mayor. And there needs to be something in here about filling those vacancies. So I don't know. I think a recommendation should. I would think we could recommend language. It would probably be a couple of sentences. What do people think about it? And I'll start with counselors.
I
Louis,
don't.
you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm not sure if I brought this one forward, but I agree that it should be written so that it's explicit because it probably will happen someday. And so, whether it's addressed in 2-2 clause A, council president election and term, as well as the section you just cited, I think it should just be some fairly simple language around how the election should take place in the case of a presidential vacancy, which could come around for other reasons. So I guess someone need to draft that language, I guess.
All right, Sheila.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. I'm actually the one who brought this up, and it doesn't have anything to do with Greenfield, but the reason I brought it up is because I'm on the executive board of my union, and we had a vacancy in our union president, and it created this cluster that, you know, it's one thing when, you know, you're dealing with labor union issues, but if you're trying to run a city, I think we can't really afford to have that kind of chaos. So I was hoping to kind of head it off at the pass just because I've seen this work out very poorly in another organization that I'm with. I don't know exactly how I would rewrite the section. I'm happy to take a stab at it, and just everyone can just know that I'm not emotionally attached to it and you're not going to hurt my feelings if you shoot me down. But I mean, I'm willing to take it on.
Okay, good. So following Otis's lead, just look in the different, it would be, it's either in, where am I? In 2-11, or is there another, what was the other section, Otis, where you talk about the president and vice president, you know, how they're elected, how they're.
Yeah, I think it's 2-2. Is that it?
Yeah. I don't think it really needs to say anything more than just something clear so that there's a process. That's all. It's not, it's not the depth of it. It's just the fact that without it there, then nobody knows what to do next. So, okay, great, Sheila. That's perfect. All right. So as far as I'm concerned, unless somebody brings up something else, we're through sections 1 and 2. Woo-hoo.
The only thing I had was, I think earlier I had submitted, David, some comments around special meeting notices on council meetings. I didn't know if we wanted to talk about those or not. They should be not very controversial, I would hope.
I have it right here somewhere. Also, let's see. Yeah. I think I printed it today to see, make sure I had it. What's you gave 3 suggestions.
Before we move on to section 3, I do have a few other issues in section 2 that I have in my notes here. So one of them is we wanted to clarify who the town clerk reports to.
Council.
And then I have a note that just says hired, elected, or appointed. And I'm not sure if that refers back to the city clerk, because when I take my notes, I always think I'm going to remember these things, right? Also, inauguration day.
We have a collective memory. Yes, I have a note. My bad. I have a note in section 2.8A. At least to change the word. I think I put in the notes the town auditor. The town may elect the town auditor. Is that? I mean, that was a place where I. But is that the section you were talking about, Sheila? You think?
It could be. So when I took these notes, I always flatter myself and assume that I'm going to remember everything we talked about just by writing down 3 words. But what I have down here is town clerk reports to ? And then on a separate line below that is hired, elected, or appointed. So I don't know if that refers to the town clerk or if it was just the next thing that happened chronologically in the meeting.
Well, just to help you out, my notes say that under A, town auditor, somebody suggested using the word elect rather than appoint. So
that might be
on
what
June
it is.
2020. So that might be what you're talking about. Does this refresh your memory so you could talk about it?
No. You said you were going to move on to section 3, but I still had those.
But I'll stay with section 2. So now I'm asking you, let's talk about it. So what do you want to suggest about section?
I don't have a suggestion. I just didn't want to move on because that was something that we had questioned, and I don't want to leave this for the next charter committee in 10 years if we've already got some ambiguity. I know that there was an issue. I don't think this has come up recently, but under the previous mayor, there was a little bit of push me pull you as far as like who the clerk reports to. So it should be clear. just, in case there's ever if we ever have a contentious, city government again. I'm sure it'll happen at some point, right?
Tomorrow.
Okay, I'm clocking out if that's the case.
Well, it's just Greenfield, it goes in a circle. It doesn't. Okay, so my suggestion is then, are we prepared to talk about that now since we're on section 2, and I'd like to stay within the section as we go forward? Or do we feel we should circle back to it at some other time, which I'm happy to do? But there's 2 things, Sheila, that I'm hearing you say. One, again, is the reminder I put into my own document about the word elect instead of appoint a town auditor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a word change. So people, especially counselors, think that that's important. Let's note it for the council to make the change. And of course, the mayor would have to think that that was okay as well. So the mayor is obviously here to speak up if that's a problem. But the idea of the town clerk being for which form of government, unless I'm wrong, I'd have to remind, when we get to 3, we could see, but under B, the town clerk clearly is mentioned as serving for the council in a related way, in a defined way.
Right.
Okay, so that wouldn't necessarily need to be changed, but what might need to be added is in the executive branch, how does the town clerk serve the executive branch? Or in another portion of the charter, define the town clerk and what the town clerk does and who the master of the town clerk is.
You're saying like move it up to section 1 under definitions?
I don't know.
I have my own thoughts on it, but I also have my own perspective, and maybe it's not something where, I don't want to make a change or suggest a change that is going to really, really mess things up for other people just because it makes it slightly more convenient for me,
Yeah, I understand. Well, again, I'd like the mayor, I know she's here, the mayor to speak up about, what her experience has been. I know in my experience as a counselor, there was tension at times between the town clerk taking, instructions from the city council at the same time that the mayor was giving the clerk either other instructions or different instructions.
Mm-hmm.
And so that does come up regularly enough, but I don't know enough about it to tell you the truth. So it's a good point. Maybe it sounds like it's not something we can talk about today, but we might want to come back to it.
We got some commenters in the queue.
Yeah, why don't we hear from mayors present, both current and past, David? That's my suggestion.
Suggestion.
Which one of us do you want to go first?
You are the mayor, so I
would say, no offense to Chris, but the current mayor goes first.
Thank you, Mayor, and Chair Singer. I just would say that similar to what John was saying, I think you need a compelling reason to change the language that's there now, that I have read now a couple of times in this meeting. There are times, daily / weekly, that it's apparent that Kathy needs my advice as the chief executive of the city. Whether she can take a day off or not, to things more important, such as how to get a police detail for City Hall during voting. That certainly cannot wait until a council meeting. Those kinds of things are important for me to be able to direct her in. It's not important certainly in my mind, for me to tell her how to do her job or countermand anything that the city council may wish to have her do, or any of those other things. Now, we all know that varies from mayor to mayor. So I don't know how you handle that, but I never think of Kathy as reporting to me. She certainly reports to the city council, and I try to leave her, as well as Tammy, alone to do the city council's work as much as possible. Mind you, I also have questions for her sometime around process and procedure.
Mhm.
And she's always very forthright and always able to, almost always able to answer the question. So I think to sum it up is, I wouldn't make it an exclusive reporting line, because there are certainly times throughout any given week that she needs to have my counsel and my direction. And I don't see my Roxanne, I mean my as the mayor. And that's really all I have to say. I'll defer to Chris for the remainder.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, it's not like this question hasn't come up before. It has. It came up right at the beginning of instituting the new form of government. One of the things that I think is important for us to recognize is that the city clerk has statutory what do I want to say, responsibilities or duties under the law that are very clear as far as the administrative side of government. You know, keeper of records and things like that. A city couldn't function without that clerk. Going back to the way the council used to be with its 27-member town council, someone was hired to do that work, but it still always remained within the town clerk's office, even when there was a larger council. But the section B, where it says the city council shall elect a city clerk to serve, I think that there's kind of a dual process that's going on here as well. First, that the city clerk is performing administrative function on the mayoral side of the government, but also serving the council by charter. I mean, this was the way that it was chosen to sort of, and I think the understanding was that because the city clerk also was, you know, responsible for the elections, responsible for language and setting up ballots and a number of other things, it just seemed like a good crossover piece. But we have to remember that even though it says, and we might want to think about this, serves a term of 3 years, and until a successor is chosen and qualified, the clerk sort of runs under a contract, which is administered by the town of Greenfield, and, you know, receives all the benefits and compensation according to certain schedules and everything else. So it's a unique position. And the question is, how much do we want to change it, clarify it, or again, holding to those 2 bars, what makes the greatest sense, the best rationale for everything in here? And yes, it can get contentious if a mayor comes in and doesn't want that person and fires that person, for instance, which they can do. And then the council says, but wait a minute, we love that person. We want that person to stay. That may be something else we want to point out for discussion. And I don't know, maybe it needs to go to ordinance. I don't know.
Thank you. John, you said that was going to be my comment, what Otis said, but I don't remember what Otis said because that was like 3 minutes ago. So do you want to?
Yeah, generally that would be a good idea to hear from the mayors first. I think for me, this is sort of it's kind of hard to legislate out dysfunction.
Right.
You know? And there's one thing, if we're changing the charter to fix a broken system, generally speaking, I've always been amazed at how well and professionally people working for the town interact with each other. But we can all think of instances in the past where that wasn't the case. I don't think you can fix that by changing the charter. I think you can have an ordinance for specific issues of who can fire who. But I think if it's an issue of they report to me, no, they don't report to me, Sometimes the answer is to have people just get their act together and act like grown-ups. And I think trying to codify every last instance of that, particularly in the charter, is unwise. So if it's addressing something where that is systemically broken, I'm all for it. But in this case, absent specific things like who can fire who, when you run into a they report to me, no, they report to me, my preference is to have people with mature heads prevail and not try to legislate away every possible instance of that behavior. That's all.
Thank you. Otis?
Good thought.
Yeah, I somewhat agree with what John said, but what I was going to say contradicts it. My experience in this has been that there certainly is confusion specifically around who is where does the town clerk fall as a direct report? So thinking of it in terms of a professional office environment, if we as counselors have feedback, good or bad, to the clerk's superior, who do we give that to so that it may be included in their evaluation? And a counselor came to the current president and myself at one point about this question, and I have to say it was not particularly resolved. We basically said, well, it seems to be the mayor seems to have authority, but I'm actually unclear, and I was not made clear during that conversation whether human resources and the mayor make evaluations of the town clerk or not. And I don't necessarily have an opinion either way, but I do think it's that it's a little bit difficult not having any clarity on that specific piece.
Thank you. I just want to say something in my own experience as well. And Chris, it's interesting. You were saying how the mayor could fire the clerk, but yet if you read the charter, it seems like the council elects the clerk and it's the council that can fire the clerk. So the question is not whether the mayor can or can't, but what does that mean if two people are the boss of a single person? So if that's the case, which is not necessarily maybe the best way to do it, but let's just assume for discussion that that's what we want to do, then you have to distinguish what areas is the mayor able to direct the clerk in, and what areas is the president of the council able to direct the clerk in. And not taking anything away from what John Lunt said, that's kind of like the Supreme Court's answer to the constitutional crisis of subpoenaing people and, can't you guys get your act together, and you don't need the Supreme Court to tell you what to do. You're going to get to a point where that's going to happen. I feel badly. Let's look at it from this perspective. I feel badly for the clerk herself or himself, because that person will get in the middle of a political crisis, maybe between the mayor and the president of the council, and that's where the immaturity could play itself out, not in the context of the clerk, him or herself. I actually think this needs to be. I think it needs to be remedied. How it needs to be remedied, I don't know. But I was president of the council, and I didn't know whether I was supposed to tell the clerk if she could or couldn't go on vacation. I knew I was, but yet there were times when I said, I really need your attention because I need this done. And then I'd hear, well, the mayor wants this done. And I'd say, no, I need this. You're my clerk. This is important. So I don't know. I don't know what. Oh, is Kathy on this? Is Kathy on this?
No, I don't think so.
No, I think you're responding to a chat, a comment that I don't know if anybody asked Kathy about the duality of the role. That might give you some insight into how.
Well, I got the insight from prior clerks, so I have not got. And Kathy goes through the system, so I'm sure. But anyway, I'm not trying to be. I just really think that I guess instead of going around and around with it, can anyone make suggestion of how we can get an answer to how to resolve this, even if it's to keep it the same? I mean, yes, Chris?
So maybe we need to do a designation of a special employee. And I don't know what that means. I can research that if you want, but maybe there should be a category in the charter that spells out the fact that the clerk is considered to be a special employee, and here are the parameters, or whatever that means. Because in one part of the charter, it does say that on the administrative and I don't know chapter and verse here, on the administrative side, the mayor does have the power to hire and fire. Of course, there's union involved, so we get that. But the other side of the charter says that the clerk works for the council. So maybe there needs to be a special employee designation here with something worked out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, based on what the charter says, I'm not sure the mayor can fire the clerk. Without, I mean, maybe the mayor would want to fire the clerk, and maybe that would be where the area of concern would be, so that the council wouldn't even know anything about the activities that would cause the mayor to feel like that the clerk should be fired. But
well,
yeah,
in a way, I agree. I don't think the mayor can fire the clerk. That might be a poor or an over-exaggerated example, but it certainly causes a conflict which can arise when the council says you can't fire the clerk because the clerk works for us.
right.
So,
Or, yeah, all right. So Chris, are you willing to?
yeah, I will take that
on?
on, the special employee piece. And I'll call Kathy and ask Kathy for her input too on,
Right.
I think that's very fair.
Mayor Rita Gardner, you're okay with that?
Mayor.
She's probably trying to answer, but she hasn't unmuted. All right, and Sheila, does that work for you, that we're now looking into it so we can move on? Are there any other parts of 2 that we should still be talking about while we have a little time?
No, I think that's great. And if Chris is going to take that on, then we can come back and we can talk about it next month and figure out if we think these changes work for us.
Yeah, it's fine.
And then the only other thing I can't tell if this is under Article 3 or I think it's under Article 3, the thing with Inauguration Day.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about that, right?
I think that's not in this section, is it?
Yeah,
I think it's
2.2. 2.2.
Thank you. Also, I want to give, Otis did send out something on September 14th. I don't know if everybody has it. I would assume they did. Section 2.2.
Well, it says,
Oh, okay.
Okay.
As soon as practice, first business day of the new year, you're saying? I think the mayor has similar language.
Yeah, I think that needs to, because otherwise you're kind of, there's this 3-day period where everyone's kind of left hanging. At least a 3-day period, right?
So I'll tell you how I would interpret this myself. I would interpret it that the new counselors do not start until the first business day when they're sworn in. So the mayor and the former counselors are still in power on January 1st, or on Saturday and Sunday if January 1st is a Friday. And if something comes up, an emergency or whatever, that it's the current sides and it's the current council that would meet to determine what to do. That's how I would read it now. So the question is, does that work for everybody or not? But that's how I would read this.
I think that's fine. But last year what happened was Bill Martin left, and then there was like this 3-day period where I think it was Mark Smith was kind of like holding the reins, and we just we had no mayor for 48 hours or 72 hours or something.
Right, but that was like any other decision that a mayor could make to say, I'm not I understand what you're saying. In other words, the mayor took the position that as of December 31st, I don't have to do anything, so I'm out of here, and there was a gap.
Was that a personal decision? I thought that was the charter.
No.
I mean, because obviously the mayor can take vacation, right?
He's the mayor until January 2nd. That's how I would read this as a lawyer. But
Okay.
I don't know any other way to write it because January 1st is a holiday. And so nobody's, who's gonna swear in the mayor and the councilors. So
Okay.
I would say let's come back to that if somebody can give another expression of it that's not this. I don't know if this is a problem or not. It sounds like there was a practical problem, but I don't know if it's a problem in the charter.
Okay.
Exercise. So the rules, you made some suggestions, Otis, and where did these come from? Section 2.6.
Yeah, they're mainly points that have been brought up by the clerk's office that I think we find a lot of reluctance in the clerk's office to call special meetings of the council, which are otherwise should not be that hard to call because of how inconvenient it is to hand deliver notices. So I just I made that suggestion because counselors are provided these days with email addresses and can be provided with read receipts and have Chromebooks. So I don't see the need anymore for hand delivering special meeting notices.
So that's the only change in these two provisions?
Yes.
Can I see a copy of what you wrote?
If people don't have it in front of you, I will come back to it the next meeting. I'll make sure that he sent out an email. I don't know. Did you send it just to me or just send it to everybody? I think he sent it to the committee.
It went to the committee. I think it got forwarded, but it was a while ago.
Okay, maybe I just have to look through my inbox. My only concern with that would be, because I do work full time and I have my dance card is pretty full. So if I'm not allowed to check my city council email while I'm at work, and then I have a meeting after work that's not related to the city council, I might not see the email quickly. But if it was, if there was like a phone call involved, I think that would wrap it up for me.
The way I think it, I left it because I didn't rewrite it so much as take out the hand delivered part. I think the notice shall be delivered within 48 hours before, at least 48 hours before the meeting. It does not specify how it would be delivered. So I think you could probably, leave a personal message with the clerk's office that you always want a phone call and something like that. But my tendency is always not to overwrite or over legislate these things and leave some ambiguity for the future. But that was just how I wrote it. So, obviously we could talk it out.
Yeah. I think acknowledgement is just like, as long as the counselors acknowledge that they received it in some form, I think is the only thing I would want to sort of add to that.
I think this needs a little more discussion only because there has to be rules that are patently fair in terms of everybody's ability to receive communication at the same time, within the same time. So if you're able to receive, if you have the ability to receive information online, that's fine, but there might be people that don't,
Right.
or situations are such that hand delivery. I think the law was made. Obviously, it's older because we didn't have technology. But the other piece is that there has to be a way that we all feel comfortable, and I'll leave it to you all to figure that out, that the system allows for everybody a reason everyone will get noticed the meeting has been scheduled.
Yes.
The old days something else, but you have to know that the clerk has to be forced to do something that we would know that everybody got notice of the meeting. So by taking out the hand delivered part, I'm not sure you did enough. It may be that there has to be some expression maybe a more general expression of that everybody has to receive notice, including but not limited to technology, hand delivered if technology is not available. You know what I mean? Instead of just taking out the hand delivered notice, because all you're doing is taking out one of the options for which notice can be given. But I don't know if it keeps the same. I have to read it and think about it. So how about if we circle back to this?
Sure.
But I understand what you're trying to do. I'm pointing out to you why it has to be really fair that everybody is going to get notice. I don't care how it's written, but.
Sure.
All right. Okay. It's 5 of 7. Do people want to keep going into Article 3? Get that behind us. If you think it's time to end the meeting by around 7, could you let me know? Otherwise, I'll assume we could at least go into Article 3 and try to get that discussed tonight.
That's fine.
I'm fine with going with Article 3, but after that, can we just call that a good stopping point?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree with you there.
Flexible.
Okay. All right. My goodness. I think I'm running out of gas. Okay, so the mayor section, I think she sent a memo,
Yep.
and those 2 changes. Let's see. Let's go to the memo. Come on, you memo. Here. All right, so Article 3, Section 3-1. In my notes, we combined C and D. So it would say, so the minimum amount would be deleted. And it would say compensation, the city council shall by ordinance establish an annual salary for the mayor, which shall become effective immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not exactly what the mayor said in her memo, but Mayor, if you're still on, I'm happy to hear from you. And then the other piece was about the qualifications back to the voter language, which we changed in the first section. And we may or may not change it further, but we changed it to be, who a voter is. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, because let's see. What sentence does it say? Who's eligible to be mayor?
Elected by and from the voters of the city.
No, I'm sorry, it's an A. Any voter shall be eligible to hold office. So that would be interesting if we're going to use voter as, if resident alien is going to be a voter, is that as a resident alien qualified to be the mayor? So that adds another twist to that definition.
Mm-hmm.
So again, just to tell you what we were trying to do, but of course confusing it because that's what lawyers are trained to do. We have a definition of voter that'll be consistent throughout the charter. So when it says a voter under Section A of 3, we go back to definition, and voter is as the mayor suggested, a resident of the city of Greenfield, whatever the other language was. But if we're letting people vote that are resident aliens, I use that term because I don't know any other, but that person would not therefore qualify to run for city council or for mayor, then we need to have being qualified to vote. We need to make sure these definitions line up. So that creates another layer. Does anybody think that I'm wet on this? The mayor, I think, wants to speak.
Oh yeah, I'll let.
Mayor, are you wanting to speak? All right. Go ahead, Otis.
Oh, I think the mayor is speaking, but on mute. I'll let her go.
There we go. Found the mute button.
Okay, thanks.
Right in front of my eyes. I hadn't given a lot of thought to A, because it's only with regard to resident alien, because it had not come up tonight, per se. I do wonder if, just a minute. I don't know if it's appropriate to have an age limit here, because I certainly don't want to go that route in an unequal way. So that would be the only thing to think about, who can actually do the job. It's monumental, and I think I would probably have Mayor Forgey's agreement on that to a point. So just a thought to think about in terms of any voter shall be eligible to hold the office of mayor. The other thing is, yes, I think you definitely do need to clarify resident alien, or however you may wish to choose to discuss it, or put it in there as definitions. Once it's in there as definitions, it is the definition. So
Okay.
you may wish to really think about that. The only other place, because of the hullabaloo around the mayor's salary, to think about is, and the only comment I have written in my book here is, do we want to change it, or do we want to eliminate it? Times change, my goal with as mayor is to professionalize the whole city of Greenfield. From time to time, Chief of Staff Danielle and I talk about really what we're doing here is building a city from the ground up. Now, you wouldn't think we'd have to say that, but there are many, many areas of our city and how we run it that need high professionalism added to it. And that's just a comment, it has nothing to do particularly with the charter, but to keep that in mind. I know that the FERCOG is grappling with this same issue. Which has to do with succession, as well as once our very excellent executive director of the FERCOG finally decides to retire, what is the appropriate compensation that gets someone of equal qualifications and experience there? I don't actually recall, without looking at my notes, which I don't have with me, how the council ended up resolving that issue with regard to the charter and the ordinance. I personally would probably say that there's no room in the charter for compensation to be mentioned.
Yes, that's
and that's
good.
the way that's the way I thought it went down.
Yeah.
The further compensation piece, D, the city council shall by ordinance establish an annual salary for the mayor, which shall become effective immediately. I do wonder if there isn't a need in that language, since you are saying the city council shall by ordinance. If there isn't room in the language in the charter to make it a little more flexible, to say that could change from year to year, or could change from term to term. So it's a tricky thing. And I if I knew, I don't recall that I was given any notes on it, how other mayoral cities handle this. There aren't many of us, so it probably wouldn't be that hard to research it, but you may not be at that point yet. So I don't have a particularly strong opinion on D. other than I think it should have a little more flexibility in it as to how you might establish an annual salary for the mayor. Is that clear? If not, I'll be happy to explain.
That's clear.
It's late in the day.
I think it was there to protect the mayor.
Yeah. Well, that's a good
So-
thing.
yeah.
I
So
vote for
if you want to take that protection out, then that's fine.
I'm talking about D now. No, I'm
I'm
not.
talking about D also.
I said change, not eliminate. Whereas on C, I said eliminate.
No, but which shall become effective immediately was for the protection of the mayor.
Yes.
So if you want to have that, yeah. So if that phrase were to be taken out, then it would just leave the ordinance to the council to decide how they want to do it, and that would be fine.
That's not what I
Those
was
words-
thinking. Yeah, that's not what I was thinking about, which shall become effective immediately in terms of change. I think I was thinking of term. The city council shall by ordinance establish an annual salary for the mayor upon the end of the 4 years or whatever. In other words, I think it's a little more complicated than to just write that particular simple sentence. Everyone else, just about in town, receives a annual increase of some sort. That is governed either by contract, negotiated through the union, or in the case of the NRs, the department heads, it's a negotiation between myself and the department heads. So I think that, and that can happen based on budgetary concerns. It can happen. I would say that is the most important way. I think what you want to guard against is I'm searching for the right term here. Arbitrariness, I guess. You don't want to say, well, we don't like this person, therefore that person shouldn't receive a salary this year. Or, an increase this year or whatever. Or, we're unsatisfied with the way the election went, so we're going to keep it the way it is. I just think that you need to consider both professionalism, which is difficult in an elective office to guarantee that you're going to get the most professional person. And also to recognize the complexities of the job.
All right. Thank you. John Lunt, did you want to say something?
I think Otis was before me in the list if he wants to go first.
Oh, he was. I apologize. Well, no, wait. Mayor benchmarking. Is that your comment, John?
I want to talk about that, but I don't want to cut in front of Otis if he had something he wanted to say.
Okay, great. Otis?
Yeah. Okay, first I'll just say I am in agreement with the Exhibit B that you put together, David, this idea of basically deleting most of Clause C and just having it say that the mayor's salary shall be set by ordinance. I think that's sufficient. However, some cities like Northampton appoints a committee to set the mayor's salary. And I've suggested that in the past. Doesn't appear to be a popular idea, but I think there's some merit in it. If we don't want to set a bottom number in the charter, and we are afraid of capriciousness from the council, then yes, I'd say it's a last resort, but it's, other cities have done it that way. And then the only other thing I wanted to say was about the definition of voter. I'm just a little bit concerned if we do change, well, there's two pieces to it. There's changing the definition of voter in the beginning to a voter is, a registered voter who resides in Greenfield. I would want our discussion to include whether that takes away rights from people who are registered to vote in Greenfield but have just moved somewhere else, but still retain the right to vote because they haven't changed their voter registration. And then next is, I personally don't see the need to specify that someone running for the mayor has to be a voter who resides in Greenfield. I just don't see the need to specify it that language. If someone wants to be foolhardy enough to run for Greenfield who doesn't actually live here, let the voters laugh them out of the campaign. But that's, again, just my opinion.
All right, well, we'll come back to voter anyway, so those are good comments. Let's see. John?
I just wanted to say that I think the mayor's salary is often a pretty politically charged issue, and one good way to provide a touchstone in a situation where different people have fears about how people might act is to benchmark and to have a sense of what mayors in similar sized towns or cities are paid, and to give people a frame of reference to help guide discussions about it, whether that happens from a committee, as Otis suggests, or a contract, or a yearly negotiation. I think that's a question that has a couple of good answers, but often benchmarking is a good way to take capriciousness out of a process. And I think it might be worth doing. I would certainly be willing to look into what mayors are making in sort of comparable areas, because I think if we wanted to put some language about benchmarking to try to give some context, I don't think that would be a terrible idea.
I'm going to let Sheila speak, and then I want to make a comment. Go ahead, Sheila.
Thank you. So we've raised a lot of really good points here. When Otis first started talking about whether or not someone is still a resident of Greenfield, I sort of, hesitated. Like, why would you still stay registered? Except I have a person who used to live in my house as a teenager and is now in college, but is still registered to vote in Greenfield because his he found himself he had some housing insecurity after he graduated high school. So yeah, if you're living in the dorms at UMass Amherst, you probably shouldn't be able to run for mayor, right? Even though he votes somewhere, he's not going to vote in Amherst because he's not really a part of that community. So we do need to be really careful about that. As far as, whether or not a non-resident alien or like whatever the legal definition is for folks who are not US citizens who want to vote, I would say that if we're going to give them the power to vote, I think that we should also say that they can also run for office. If someone, I feel like it would be, we don't want to disenfranchise people. So if we're going to say you can vote, but you can't, run for city council, run for school committee, I don't feel like that's fair. But I do want to address the resident question because, like I said, I've got a, college kid who uses my address still. I don't want to add an age limit because, if you look at, Alex Morse, he's doing a great job in Holyoke. I think, I don't know, was he 20 when he ran for mayor? And he's had a challenger every single time. He always wins. He's, made some great strides in Holyoke. And now he just ran, for Congress. I didn't make it, but he ran against Richie Neal. And, that's not someone I would want to eliminate. And I think that the only office that has age limits is president, I believe. I don't think you have an age limit to be a state rep or to be a congressman or anything else. So I think we should be careful about that.
Isn't there a natural age limit for becoming a registered voter? Isn't there You have to be a
Well, yeah,
certain
you have to
age.
be 18 to register as a voter.
So that's it.
Yeah, well, there are towns, believe it or not, there are towns in America that have dogs for mayor, and I'm sure that none of those dogs are 18. So, I mean, we have to have something, right? But
In
you know,
dog age, they were.
okay, fair enough. But yeah, I'm curious about hearing about the salary committee, because if you're worried about the mayor and the council not getting along, you know, I mean, we were talking earlier about like, let's just be mature and let's just be adults, you know, and just like move the city forward. If you did get into a seriously contentious situation, I would be worried about like who appoints the salary committee at that point. Is it like the mayor appoints 3 and the council appoints 3, or are they like, you know? So I wonder if you're kind of loading the dice that way too. But this is one of the sections that I was assigned, and I was going to offer, if Roxanne is still on the line, I'm going to take a crack at sort of clearing up some of these things. And if I could send it to you maybe by the end of the week, would you have a chance to look at it and let me know if you have edits? That way I can bring it up to the full committee. Does that make sense? Or
You're
if you don't have
asking
time to do
Roxanne,
that next
right?
week.
You're asking Roxanne, correct?
Yeah, is she still here? I can only see a few people.
She's here. She's here. She's here. Here's her smiley face. She raised her hand. Yes. I just, Sheila, before you go to that much trouble, let me say this. Is this not another instance of comparing ordinance with charter provision? To me, if the charter says, what the charter should say, so right now, the way the mayor had edited it, the town council shall by ordinance establish an annual salary for the mayor. So that just directs that power to the council. That means that the mayor is vulnerable to the power of the council, subject to the veto. If the mayor, I know you're here, Mayor, but I'm saying the mayor in general were to think that, no, I want to participate in the language about my compensation, so I want it to be in the charter. You see what I'm saying? It's really right
Well,
now.
that's why I'm thinking that she and I. That's why I thought
I
if she
personally
and I
think it should be an
sort of,
ordinance, but that's my
right.
opinion.
No, I get your point. But I think that if she and I could kind of go back and forth with a couple of drafts and sort of like go through both of those perspectives and hopefully arrive at something that's going to work out really well, and everybody on the charter committee is just going to love and vote for unanimously. My perfect world.
Luckily, we're that mature group that John Lund keeps talking about. But what I'm thinking more is, think of it in a civics way this way. Do you want to lock the charter into something that you'd rather see as an ordinance so it could be amended from time to time by the city council? That's the only thing I'm saying.
No. I'm
You
not
may
saying
come up
that we
with
need to.
whichever.
I actually am in favor. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'm in favor of removing the number from the charter, because if in 10 years the charter commission comes and meets, and you know, let's say that the US dollar deflates and we can't afford a $70,000 salary. I don't know if that is an economic possibility or reality, but I don't like having a number in there, especially when you're talking about something that's not going to be updated for 10 years. That's kind of ridiculous. So I do agree that we should point back to the ordinance, because the ordinance can be updated as necessary.
I'm thinking about, I know we're almost at the end, but we're talking about this, so I don't want, okay. If you look at the language in the charter, it says a minimum salary of 70,000. The reason it says that is because there was fear on the charter commission that if the city council had the power to decide the salary of the mayor, they would make it a low amount so that we wouldn't get qualified people to run for mayor. So the 70,000 is a minimum. So I would even put out, should that remain in there so that the council can never go below that? Or should there be another number that they can't go below? And the rest of it is subject to the variation of of how the council works. It's not the salary of the mayor. It's just
Okay.
the minimum.
No. I see your point.
You know,
But
so
I was
that's
thinking,
how you want to write the charter. I think thinking along those lines, not. I mean, the idea of benchmarking is a great idea. Don't get me wrong, and I think the ordinances committee of the city council is going to have a lot of work to do after this, because there's a lot of things that might be that our committee might ask to go down to the council level and talk it out. So anyway, as we end the meeting, that's all I put out to you is go ahead, do your thing. But the question I'd like you to ask yourself is, should this be in the charter or should it be in an ordinance? And the idea of a minimum salary, should that remain to protect the mayor or not? And that's, and of course, I'd like the mayor to weigh in as well. So can we?
so when I send my draft, how about I copy you and send it to the mayor? That way,
Well, send it to the
you
mayor.
have-
Yeah, and then I'll send it out to everybody.
perfect.
All right, before we adjourn, I was thinking we would meet on Monday, November 9th. That's an open day for council meetings and other meetings that I know about. Does that work for everybody? Did I say
Give me one
November?
moment.
I'm sorry, it's a Monday.
Works for me.
Okay, that seals it.
Sorry, I have another meeting, but you can go ahead.
Okay with me also.
Thank you, Alan. John, is your meeting at the same time? John,
Yes, it's 5 to 7.
yeah,
I
I want to
can
talk
make it
about.
work.
I want to talk about the school committee the next meeting. I'd like you to be there. Well, Mondays are the only days that are open. That's why I picked the Mondays. The council tends to take Tuesday. The council and the boards take Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
You know what, David? I'll just absent myself from the other meeting, so it's okay.
All right, you're terrific. All right, Erin, works for you? Works for you, I assume? I'm not hearing any. Okay, so November 9th at 5:30. Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Gilmore.
Second, 4G.
Okay, I'll take a roll call. I can see you all there. Chris, what do you say? Yes, right?
Of course I do.
Otis, what do you say?
Yes.
Alan, what do you say?
Yes.
John, what do you say?
Yes.
Sheila, what do you say?
Yes.
Erin, what do you say?
Yes.
Before I say yes so that the meeting is over, I want to thank all of you. This was a great meeting. It's a good group. I really enjoy working with all of you. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. And the answer is yes, I also agree. So meeting is adjourned.